These guys are.
Let's go, boss. Let's do all
Two guys in.
All right, Graham, G to your cameras.
Welcome back to today's Genesee County Primary Election Forum here at the White Horse. I'm Tom Sumner. Today we're exploring two races for the Genesee County Board of Commissioners. This hour we'll learn about the three Republicans running for the 5th district seat currently held by incumbent Democrat Mark Young. Before I get to the introductions, I want to thank the White Horse and all of you who have gathered here today. I want to thank singer Heather Jones is going to be coming up in just a little bit when we take a break, and you're going to really enjoy that, I'm sure.
How's my chat?
Who are here in person. In a moment, I will introduce the candidates, and they will be given an opportunity to make brief opening statements. But first, our esteemed panelists. I'll begin by reintroducing our esteemed panel of premier political pundits. They are Paul Rosicki from Rock Community College. Paul, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Down on the other end, George Moss from the University of Michigan Flint. George, welcome back as well.
Thank you, Tom.
And last but certainly not least, our media guest panelist, Lou Lobsinger from Super Talk 1570 AM. Lou, good to have you here.
Nice to be here.
If you don't know by now, there are three Republicans running in the August primary for the 5th district seat on the Genesee County Board of Commissioners. They are Bill Delaney. Bill, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Kathy Lane. Kathy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And also invited, but not in attendance, Matthew Telligan. There's an old saying that says decisions are made by those who show up, so we press on anyway. In a moment, I'll give each of you 90 seconds for an opening statement. We'll begin the questions from the panel. There will be an opportunity for a closing statement at the end as well on this forum, but first a few guidelines. Time is tight. We're going to try and keep it equal, so try to be specific and brief when answering. Once again, I know that's an oxymoron in political discussions, but
Is that too loud?
you will have 90 seconds for each answer. When you hear this bell, you have 15 seconds to complete your answer. We'll start the opening statements with Bill Delaney, and then the first question will go to Cathy Lane, and then we'll rotate with candidate answers first and last throughout the rest of the forum. I caution the panelists, especially George Moss, that you have 30 seconds in which to set up context for each of your questions. If you get to 30 seconds, you will hear the bell, and I will ask you to ask your question. Now for the opening statements, remember you have 90 seconds. When you hear the bell, you have 15 seconds to finish your comment. And please address your comments to the panel or the audience and not to each other. We want a forum and not a debate. Mr. Delaney, we start with you. You have 90 seconds for an opening statement.
Thank you, John. Yeah, first of all, thank you for sponsoring this forum. I think the better informed public is the best informed, and I look forward to serving the residents of 5th District County Commissioners. As been indicated, my name is Bill Delaney. My background, experience, and education is that for 18 years I was supervisor of Grand Blanc Township. As supervisor of Grand Blanc Township, it was my duty to not only manage the township on a day-to-day basis, but also to create multi-million-dollar balanced budgets, submit them to the township board for approval, which they did every time. And for 18 years, we had revenues in excess of expenditures, and we always had a balanced budget. We always had revenues available for future spending. In addition to that, my experience after I left township government was that I was director of developmental services for Van Buren Township, Western Wayne County, where I was responsible for building, planning, zoning, code enforcement, and following that consulting position, I was with the Huron Township, Western Wayne County, doing essentially the same position. My candidacy for this, I think, brings forward my background and experience of dealing with the Genesee County for 18 years, and I look forward to serving the residents again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. Cathy Lane, you have 90 seconds for an opening statement as well.
Thank you again for inviting me. I guess the ideas that I bring to this position is the fact that for 26 years I served the people of Grand Lake Township. I prefer to be called a public servant rather than a politician, because I think once you're elected, you are number one, not an employer as much as an employee, because the taxpayers and the voters put you there to oversee their budgets, their business, and they want to be able to trust you and to be sure that they can reach you and ask any questions about what is going on with their family business. And that is the approach that I take, which I think is different from other people, is that I want to serve, I want to be open and honest, and let people know that I'm not looking to be anything more than someone that is going to help them build the best kind of business we can with their taxpayer money.
Thank you. I think George Ross could take some lessons. We move on to round one of the questions. We start with Paul Rosicki.
Good. I'd like to first of all thank both of you.
And the first question, by the way, goes to Cathy Lane.
Okay, Cathy, thank you for being here, and Bill, I'd like to thank you for being here as well. I appreciate it a lot. I'd like to start off with maybe the biggest issue of the year, that is roads. What role could the county play in making sure our roads would get repaired? In particular, would you favor a tax increase, either gasoline or otherwise, to repair the roads? Maybe kind of a parallel question, if you have time, would you favor an elected road commission rather than an appointed one?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the road commission that I've worked with over the last several years, because one of the things that we had in the township, as they've had in all the townships where the road commission controls our roads, was that the people now had to pay all of the assessment to get their roads improved. And therefore, one of the things people always want to know before they sign a petition is how much is it going to cost. So I initiated an information form, and John Daly and Mr. Pavani and Mr. Hill put all that information together, and we met strictly with the homeowners in any of the subdivisions. They would go sometimes for 3 hours, but the people got their questions answered and had a better idea before signing their petitions what was going to happen. And then the other thing that I brought forward from my time in Oakland County was, instead of paying for it by lineal front footage, everybody agreed, it was also legal, that everybody in a subdivision would pay the same amount, so that someone with 30 feet of frontage in a cul-de-sac paid the same thing as a person in the corner. The state requires it be by lineal front footage, but it doesn't mandate that they can't share equally. So from 2008, that's the way we did it. And no, I like the operation of the road commission so that they can act independently, and the best way and the only way to get money is always from the taxpayers, so I'd have to really evaluate.
Mr. Delaney, same question.
Yes, thank you very much. In regards to the taxing for roads, I have never been in favor of an administrative tax increase. That is a tax increase imposed upon the residents, whether it's wherever, whether it's a township, city, without the, by just administratively doing it by council action or by township board action. I do favor an opportunity for residents to vote their level of taxation. If they wish to be taxed for roads, then therefore they should have a proposition placed on a ballot, preferably a November ballot where the most number of people will show up to vote, and decide at what level they wish to be taxed and at what level they wish their roads to be improved. As you know, Public Act 51 from the state collects the state gas, weight, and use taxes that funds roads, which is woefully inadequate, and there seems to be no improvement on the horizon except for the state to dip into their rainy day fund and the general fund to improve more money. Secondly, in regards to the elected road commission versus an appointed road commission, as you know, the road commission is appointed by the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners, and I don't see, if it was elected, what a benefit would be to the residents, because really it's the manager reporting to the road commission that does the day-to-day business.
All right. Lou Lobsinger gets the next question. Lou, have you ever experienced in your years doing the morning radio show where the pundits were longer winded than the candidates?
George makes a lot of sense over here. I gotta say,
Anyway, the next question goes to Lou Lobsinger, and first to respond will be Bill Delaney.
Bill, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lou.
If elected, when elected, what would be your number one priority your first day in office?
My number one priority first day of office is to review the county budget and to make sure, number one, that it's balanced and the allocation of funds are going to the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of Genesee County, and particularly my District 5. And knowing full well that over 50% of the budget goes to the Sheriff's Department for jail and paramedic services, that public safety is my number one priority. Then secondly, into the prosecutor's office, as far as prosecuting the criminals. And then thirdly is the county health department, where we can take care of the health portion of what the county is responsible for by mandate to take care of the citizens of the district or of the county. Thank you.
Same question, Cathy Lane.
On the first day I'm elected, I would have already looked at the budget. I would say thank you, number one, to the voters for offering me the opportunity to serve them. I would then make sure that I met with each of the department heads, because right now I think that there's too much lack of trust or communication between the department heads and the board, so that they are ending up with an awful lot of lawsuits. So I want them to know I don't have all the answers. They and their employees know how to do their job better than I do. Although I have worked in the treasurer's office, I have done elections, but I want them to know I'm going to be open and I'm going to be listening to what their concerns are, and that as a team, we're going to work towards bringing Genesee County back to its premier position like it had many years ago, and that we're all going to work together as a team and wisely spend the pennies. That's what I'm going to look at, the pennies, because sometimes they're more important than the dollars, as to get ourselves back on track financially.
Thank you.
All right, and thanks for being brief. That gives George a little more time to ask questions.
I'm going to be extremely brief. I want to welcome both of you here.
Getting a reputation.
I want to ask, I think I'm asking Cathy, is that right? Ms. Lane?
Yeah, first question will go to Cathy.
Okay, I want to first of all welcome both of you here, and thank you for coming. I was very impressed with your opening statement about being a employee of the voters. I'm really concerned about the comment was made by Mr. Delaney about the funds being woefully inadequate. That may well be the case, but how do we check to find that to be true before we even think about raising taxes? Make sure the money is already in the till of being spent wisely by the people in Lansing. Do we have any way of checking that?
I'm allowing George to use some of my time to finish his question.
Cathy, are you yielding time?
Yes, sir, I am, gladly.
You are too kind.
Well, I guess being a first-generation German, I would say beforehand always, if the federal government had my parents in charge of the money, there never would be a deficit. Because the people, first of all, have to realize it's needs that you take care of first. Wants come secondly. It's the individual people that are important. Now, my husband was a retired police officer, so I understand, and I have lived the policeman's life. I have a son who's a state trooper, and I have a son that's a firefighter. So I understand people wanting to be safe in the community. And so I'm willing to look at that and give them as much money as we can. But I think we have to appreciate that we don't have the funds. The only way that we can get any money is from the taxpayers by a vote of the people, because the county, like townships, are maxed out as to what they can levy of their own. Fees are the other way to get money in grants. And And I think that we've been very fortunate that the state has stepped up and helped Flint. They're probably going to have to step up and help a whole lot of other cities as they have Detroit. But it's that teamwork and watching how we spend money that's going to count.
All right. Same question, Mr. Delaney.
Yes, perhaps I misspoke myself when I was talking about taxes. Number one is, it's the people that decide at what level they're taxed and for what services they will receive. And when the people that vote on the tax, that's a specific tax, and that's all that tax can be used for. And so therefore, when you get the funds in, then you can spend the money. But when the funds don't come in, there's no improvement, excuse me, to be made. And so therefore, it's an avenue of which the Genesee County Board of Commissioners has no control whatsoever over roads. Maybe the road commission does, but it's independently funded by the state. The receivers of the funds, the townships, the cities, and the villages, if they wish to increase their level of participation, that's when they go from the vote of the people, and the people then decide at what level they're taxed for what services they receive, which is the most democratic thing to do.
Okay, that wraps up this segment, and we're going to take a very, very short break, and we'll be back with more right after this. Now, we're going to vary a little bit from the cue sheets that you have, and I'm going to do basically what's called faking a break here for editing purposes for some of the technical people, so they can drop in sponsors when this stuff airs later on. So we're going to roll right back into it as if we're coming back from commercial. After this next round of questions, we are going to take about a 10-minute break. We're going to hear some great music coming up in just a little bit. So we'll take, here we go. And welcome back to this candidate forum at the White Horse with the Republicans vying in the August primary for the Genesee County Board seat. All three candidates were invited. We have two of the three here, Bill Delaney and Cathy Lane, and our political pundits as well, Paul Rozicki, Lou Lobsinger, and George Moss. We get into round two of the questioning, and we start the questions. I'm not sure who we go back to. Paul gets to ask the question. Who's the first one to answer? Does that go to Bill Delaney this time? All right. I forgot when George was asking his question.
It's easy to get lost there. So let me start off with Mr. Delaney with a question here. Genesee County has recently combined registered deeds in the county clerk office, like a number of counties have. Was that a good idea, and should it continue, or should we go back to having separate offices?
Well, one has to go back and say, why did the County Board of Commissioners do it in the first place? And I would suspect that it was a conflict between one or both of the persons that was either the county clerk or the register of deeds. So they went about solving a problem in their minds, and that problem was to join the two offices. Now, after they're joined, there appears to be another turmoil that has been established, so there's some movement afoot to separate them back. And was it a good idea? No, it wasn't a good idea. They should have been kept separate. They were elected separate, and it's a personality conflict versus a business decision. Now if it went back, they would increase their expenses. They did save some money by joining the two together, so therefore they should live with what they did for more than 2 years and work to improve the conflicts that have developed between those two county departments and the County Board of Commissioners. I think that's a resolution.
Thank you.
Same question for Cathy Lane.
Oh, excuse me. For my point of view, I think that number one, they saved money by having Mr. Gleason be both a clerk over the Register of Deeds and all of the other responsibilities. The clerk is the historian of our township. I think with the economy getting tighter, we had one side, the Board of Commissioners, trying to save more money, and we had a newly elected clerk come in who needed to get comfortable with what was going on. I know that right now, as far as elections and the legal situation, he's handling those as his staff are. Remember, it's not just the elected official, but the staff. They're all working harder. I think that if he had an additional staff person that he might want to put in charge of the Register of Deeds to oversee that a little bit more closely, that would take care of the problems. I think, again, we're getting back to two people or two groups with different opinions not wanting to work together. And sometimes elected boards who don't have to go in there and do the day-to-day operations of answering the phone, having deadlines from the state for elections, and the needs of the public wanting an answer more quickly, you can't do it all. So you have to give them more time, but you have to be better team players than having all the lawsuits and the arguing going back and forth.
Thank you. And the next question goes to Lou Lotzinger, and the answers start with Cathy Lee.
Cathy, in recent conversations I've had with some people, I've been led to believe that the county is working under some deficits, some debt that they're carrying forward from day to day, and I would imagine some of that's coming from legacy costs as well as day-to-day operations. When elected, what would be the first thing you would do to get that under control and to shore it up?
Well, first of all, the legacy costs for OPEB, which are the health care benefits, not only for the retirees but current employees, requires an audit every 3 years so that you have an actual accounting firm that does it and gives you a more accurate idea of where you are. With those benefits, improving the health care package can be done at better rates. We did it in Grand Blanc Township, and that's one way of doing savings. But again, where I was employed and retired, the city of Bloomfield Hills did the same thing. Got a good insurance agent and had him come up with a better package that kept everybody with the same insurance coverage, but less cost. So that's the first thing you do. But the other thing that people have to remember, both elected and our voters, in Grand Blanc Township, we are back to the values that we had in 2004 as far as our property taxes. Anybody who does their own family budget knows that if you go backwards 10 years to what you were earning, you have got to suffer, you have to think. And that's what it's going to take, and we can't rush it. But if you face that we have deficits and we work together, again, by cutting lawsuits, we can do better.
Mr. Delaney, same question.
Is the solution to the deficits, which is, as Mrs. Lane spoke to, which is OPEB, is not that just you save money, and then the question is, what do you do with the savings? If you save the money and put it into the general fund and expend it out in some other area, then you're not addressing the deficit at all. Why you need to address the deficit is to start paying down the deficit by making an annual contribution to a separate fund that can't be tapped for any other purposes than for paying for retiree medical and those expenses. And no unit of government, or very few, well, every unit of government has this to be accounted for, and in 2016 it's going to be part of their annual physical audit. But how you do it is that when you save the money, or what money you save, you make judiciously an allocation every year to a separate fund to pay that deficit, that liability down, so that someday in the future it gets paid off. Right now, it's being ignored, and all they're doing is kicking the can down the road to some other unit, to some other board or commission, whoever is overseeing those funds. Thank you.
Thank you. And the question moves on now to George Moss, and Bill Delaney has the first answer.
Okay, I want to ask you about the no-bid contracts. I was shocked to find that, at least on 2 occasions, that the board has had no bids made on money spent, taxpayers' money being spent. I want to know what your position is on that, and would you, in fact, also favor moving the meeting from 9 o'clock in the morning to maybe a more agreeable time to taxpayers who can come and speak to the board, maybe at 7 o'clock at night, for example, or some other time, 9 o'clock in the morning seems to be appropriate. And it seems like it's reducing the number of people that can come to the meetings.
George, it's a very good question. Number one is I am absolutely and totally against no bid contracts. No bid contracts is not to any benefit of the public because of the fact that they're not competitive. And so therefore, if no bid contracts came before me as a county commissioner, I'd say no, 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 sir, 3 bags full, and say we're not going to be dealing with no bid contracts. We got to go to a purchasing director that is fully empowered to make those purchasing decisions that bid projects. And secondly, as far as the 9 o'clock meeting, I agree with you. 9 o'clock is not a convenient time for most residents of the county. And in fact, I'd go even a step further. I think the County Board of Commissioners should move the meetings out periodically, out of the county building and out to the local units of government around the county and hold them at night so that the residents, number one, would not have that far to travel, particularly in several units of government. And number two, it's a more convenient time for them to see their county at work and to see their government do what's correct for them. And then they have an opportunity for giving input where they do not have that at the present time and at the present hours.
Cathy Lane, same question.
I'm totally in favor of transparency for the voters who elected us. In Grand Blanc Township, we used to have a policy where the township supervisor could spend up to $20,000 without getting any bids. We changed that when I came back on board, and we started establishing it down to $5,000. So you would get 3 quotes, and then if it had to go out for bids, we were very open in getting bids. I also support that when you go out for bids, when you have a local business in Genesee County, that even if they are within a slightly higher range, whatever seems reasonable, I would tend to support having local businesses be awarded any contracts, although I would definitely, again, watch the money. When you have transparency, that means that when you're asked a question, you give it openly. I don't know that it's possible to always move the county board meetings out to the out county, but certainly I thank Ernestine Toon and some of her staff that started televising these meetings. And so keeping it open and keeping it honest is what's most important to me.
Thank you, and we're going to take a short break for sponsor and media ID, etc. And we'll be back in just a few moments with the bonus round and the candidates' closing remarks right after this. And for those of you who've been so patiently putting up with us talking politics in a bar, and I've always said, where else should you talk politics but in a bar? We're going to have some really wonderful music, and if you have not heard this woman sing, Heather Jones is phenomenal. She's going to sing a couple, 3 songs while we take a break. We'll come back and we'll wrap this up. And then be sure and stop and talk to her if you get a chance, and find out where they're playing later tonight, because I'll be there for sure. She's not going to be staying in the area. She's going to be leaving this fall, so you'll want to take in as much of her as you possibly can, and her accompanist, Randy Dunkley. We'll be back in just a few minutes.